Hey folks, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the channel, we will take a quick look at Elder Space, and this is based off of the Doom Pilgrim engine. And so if you're familiar with Doom Pilgrim, you will be right at home in the box. You will get all of your rules that are written on the box, and you will get a large deck of cards, a large deck of adventure cards, with Waclaw Treyer's amazing art. I mean, his art just keeps getting better. We'll take a closer look at some of these cards a little later in the video. And you will also need to download a character sheet, which you can on his website. But in this game, Elder Space, you are playing as an explorer, as a rift crawler inquisitor, and you are teleporting from one rift to the next, going through these weird alternate otherworldly dimensions and encountering all kinds of creatures and weird situations. And in the game, to succeed in the game, to win the game, you need a certain number of successes greater than the number of your failures. If that happens by the time you've gone through all of your cards, you win. If your failures outnumber your successes, then you have lost. And successes will come in a variety of different categories, such as knowledge, fauna, flora, fungi, mineral, and unidentified. And each one of those will have kind of a little prompt associated with it, but you'll keep a track of those and then add them up at the end of your game to determine how many successes you have acquired. You can also get fight enhancements, and these are things that you can kind of spend or keep track of in order to mitigate some of the damage that happens to your character. And the way you lose the game without completing it is if any of your damage limits reach their threshold. And so we have a few different ways we can keep track of our physical damage, our body trauma, our physical trauma, and our board trauma. And those will all have a limit associated with the character that we choose to play as. And if any of those ever reaches the limit, then it's game over. Our character has died. We can also find items. And the items that you find in this game, a lot of them don't have, mechanical benefits. You're not rolling dice and adding +1s or +2s or anything like that. The items you find will be kind of like keywords. It will be triggers that you might find on another card that says, if you have X, then do Y, that kind of thing. It's a pretty simple game. It's all about the narrative. It's all about the story. And so when we start the game, we will choose what character we want to play, and this will give us our attributes, our limits. And so this unsure mission was offered to you as, so are you a hobo living on the streets to whom they promise a decent living in return? Are you a prisoner to whom they promised freedom? Or are you an old intelligence agency agent with serious sins to be forgiven? So each one of those has different game over limits. Let's randomize that with a D6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, 6, and a 5, 6. So we are an old intelligence agent with serious sins to be forgiven. And so that's C. We look at this. So our damage limit is 15. So if we ever take 15 damage, we lose. Our body trauma limit is 3. Our physical trauma is 3, and our board trauma is 4. So those are all of our damage thresholds. Now you can make the game easier or harder by starting off with some gemstones that have a value of 2. Value is kind of a generic currency, an ambiguous currency that you can use to trade with people and creatures that you have found. You can start with more or less failure. You can start with more or fewer thresholds for your damage. But we also have a number of failures. So we start with 6 failure. So we need to get at least 7 successes by the end of the game in order to win this game. And that's basically it for the character creation. This is a highly narrative game, and so most of the things you're going to be doing are you're going to be reading the backs of these cards. And there are a whole mess of cards with all kinds of fantastic art. And because this is more science fiction themed, it has more science fiction themed art. There's a lot more use of color on these cards than there are in Doom Pilgrim. And just some of this is amazing. If you guys don't follow Waclaw Treyer on Facebook, I would highly recommend following him just to see how his art has progressed. God, that's so cool. But his art just keeps getting better and more adventurous, and I love the vibes and just the otherworldly feeling that his art makes me feel like I get sucked into this world. Now, I do have one point of criticism, and I don't mean any disrespect, of course, but English is not this designer's first language, and it does show in the text writing. And I would love it if he ever got the opportunity to work with a native English speaker to help him write these prompts. And it would just, I think, elevate his incredible imagination and his talent at coming up of devising these weird locations and inhabitants and situations. So you do just kind of have to get over some of the stilted language. But that's just something that comes with somebody not being a native speaker. So I don't mean any disrespect by that at all. But a normal game will have you going through around 60 cards. But for this example, I'm just going to give this a shuffle, and we'll just kind of pull off a handful of cards off the top. Okay, so we'll give that a shuffle, we'll give that a cut, and we'll just take kind of a subset here off the top. Okay, so that'll be our deck that we are working through on this example. And so to play this game, it is kind of like that other game we just took a look at, Void Realm. You will have your deck of cards, you will draw out 3 cards, you will choose one to encounter, you will choose one to discard, and then you will choose another to encounter later by putting that at the bottom of the deck. So let's place that there, and now let's draw our first 3 cards to see what we are encountering. And just right away, the card I want to encounter is that. Just look at that art. That is so cool. That is so weird and bizarre. I love it. So let's discard this card. So we'll never encounter this card. We will encounter this card at the end of the game. So we'll place that at the bottom of our deck. And now this is the card that we are encountering. So we flip it over and we read it. This creature looks like a combination of machine and organism. After all, you are such a combination yourself. The only difference is that this thing is a hell of a lot bigger and has a hell of a lot more legs. Wow, look at that. That's awesome. Okay, this mechanism on its neck looks like it could contain a communication unit, but the creature doesn't seem to be eager to use it. In fact, it doesn't notice you at all. It just walks by on a barren planet that resembles Earth's moon in its surface, but has a much stronger gravity. You think the best you can do is follow its steps and investigate if it, by chance, can bring you to its makers or something other of interest. You follow it for hours, but nothing changes. The surface is still barren, the same. The thing is just going and going. Finally, you start to think that there is maybe nothing organic in it, as it doesn't search for any food and its movement is way too regular. On the contrary, you would appreciate some change, or, when we talked about food, some food. After another few hours, you realize that this was just a waste of time and resources. You were following a primitive robot on a boring planet with gravity that makes every step hard. Failure +1. So we just wasted a whole bunch of time following this beast, following this weird creature that was a mechanoid of some kind. And it didn't lead us to anything interesting. We didn't gain any knowledge of fauna or flora or anything like that. All we gained was a failure because we wasted our time and we wasted our resources. So our failure now goes up to 7. So now to win in this game, we need to have 8 or more successes. So this gets discarded with text side up because you might have to look back at the cards that you've encountered before to remember things. And now we repeat the process. So let's draw our next 3 cards here. And so each time that we encounter a new card, we are going through this rift. We are going through this warp zone into a new dimension, into an uncharted territory. Let's go ahead and encounter this. I want to encounter this later, so I'll place that under there, and I will discard that. Okay, so let's take a look at this card. What will this offer us? A large metal box hanging from an upside-down rocket makes strange music. Suddenly you see terribly disgusting creatures approaching you. They slow down, and then you realize that this music is repelling them. But there should also be something from which they are to be repelled. Is there something hidden in that rocket? At the moment, you see guards are approaching. They are heavily armed. If you have to choose between them and the monsters, you would rather measure your strength with the later. You raise your hands to indicate that you are not a threat. Do you want to activate the teleporter first, or will you wait to see how the situation develops? Let's wait to see how the situation develops. We're going to 2. They order you to hand over all things and they capture you. Your mission ends here. Oh no. Okay, so we just lost the game. This game is completely random and it's all about having that journey, creating that journey that happens. So there will be ways that you can just lose the game. And because it takes literally no time at all to set up a new game, it's not really that much of an issue. Let's flip back to prompt number 1. The guards noticed that you pressed your device before you put your hands up. So we pressed our teleportation device to beam us away to another region. They yell at you to lie down. You have no choice but to do it. They run towards you. At that moment, you already disappear, but they still have time to drag you over the head with the butt of a rifle. You get body trauma +1, severe concussion. Okay, so we took body trauma +1, so we're going to add 1 to our body trauma, and that was due to a severe concussion. So that severe concussion might come into play later, so you just write that on your character sheet. And we have 1 body trauma. We can only take 2 more before our adventure ends. And this continues. And if the next card contains an immediate danger, this danger will kill you before you can get up from the ground. Okay, so let's do 1 more here. 1, 2, and 3. Again, amazing art on these cards. That looks really spooky. These 3 guys, that could pose some threat. This kind of black moon in a purple sky is pretty ominous. This guy looks like maybe he's peering out at us from some kind of building. Let's encounter that guy. I'll discard that. We will have that encounter with the dark moon later. And now let's see what happens here. Damn, something that shouldn't have happened has happened. Oh no, something that shouldn't have happened. That's terrible. You meet yourself coming to the same spatio-temporal gap, but from another time and space. Oh man, failure +2. Man, we are not doing good. The game I played earlier, I didn't gain any additional failure, so this is really bad. Your doppelganger seems to be as pissed by it as you. Well, why should it be otherwise? Still, you're at least a little different, because while you're talking, he's silent. You look damn good, buddy, but I don't know what the consequences of this might be. Maybe we should break up as quickly as possible and pretend we never met. What do you think? What would I think? Of course, I agree, but I was hoping we'd at least think about it. Think about it yourself. It'll work out the same in this case. I'll rest a bit meanwhile. See, this doppelganger seems to be a little more cunning after all, maybe an hour older and so more experienced, or a little younger and fresher in thought. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, you end up splitting up, making sure you're each entering different coordinates into the teleporter. Unfortunately, this episode has shaken up the entire teleportation system, and it'll take a while for it to reset. For the next 3 rounds, play cards from the top of the deck. No selection, then discard those 3 cards. Okay, so that's interesting. That little encounter, we had some failure. It was quite traumatic meeting our doppelganger. What are they up to? What have I been up to that I don't know about? So I think Doom Pilgrim and Elder Space, I think these are games that kind of, benefit maybe from having some kind of journal so you can keep a story going and you can kind of connect the dots between the prompts. And so the next thing we have to do is we have to encounter this card, and then this card right in a row without having any choice. When you've gone through your deck and you're down to your last 3 cards, you will lay all 3 of those out and then you will encounter one after another. Once you've encountered your final card, that is when you will tally up your successes and your failures. Hopefully you've survived long enough to get to that point. And then that will determine whether or not you have won or lost the game. So I like these games. I think they're relatively simple, but they are fun. I do wish that the prose was just better structured, but I totally get that, that's just not possible right now. I don't know how much, it costs a lot of money to work with a writer. The designer definitely has the art down. The art is just so amazing. And I often use these cards, use the cards in Doom Pilgrim just with other games, with other kinds of solo RPG games as kind of an oracle, as a randomizer. You know, you draw this card and what the heck is going on here? You could have a whole adventure just based on this card. Those kind of weird red creatures there, some fungus that you find maybe in a cave. That's a weird creature. Some kind of robot with a bunch of heads on spikes sticking out of its head. Yeah, this is super cool. You know, maybe he could trade some art for some writing or something like that. You know, get into the the barter economy. But I would love to see the text in these games just kind of tightened up a little bit. There seems to be some, you know, some unnecessary words that make reading it a little more cumbersome than it needs to be, but that's perfectly okay. You know, there really aren't a ton of games like this. It's a pretty unique system. I like the keyword system. I like how it was used in Void Realm. I like how it's used in Doom Pilgrim, and I like how it's used here. And you know, these kinds of little indie games are just kind of what keeps me going. I love discovering these and I love playing them. And I'm super, super thankful to an organization like the Game Crafter that just makes something like this possible. You know, back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, none of this would be possible. It would be some small little game that somebody made in their house, and then maybe, you know, if you ever went to old game stores, you would see these super, super low budget indie games just sold in like plastic sacks or something, plastic Ziploc bags. And this would be something like that. And it would be very regional. It would be regionally locked. You know, if you weren't in the city or the territory, the state or the country where that designer lived, you would never have a chance to experience something like this. But because of the Game Crafter, we have that experience. Because of things like itch.io and Drive-Thru RPG, we can have these little indie experiences all around the world. And it just opens up so much space to play in and so much space to create in. And I am eternally grateful for all of that stuff. I think it's pretty cool. But I just wanted to give a quick preview. If you haven't yet pulled the trigger on Doom Pilgrim, maybe you prefer science fiction over fantasy. So this might be, you know, more in your bag. But go to Game Crafter and check it out. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.